Important ethical consideration or principle is having the level of privacy for your users that at least adheres to your privacy agreement. For this part, it's also important to know which levels of data anonymization are there available for the users, because there is a difference between anonymized and anonymous data or pseudo-anonymous data. Anonymized data means that the user cannot be tied to their actions and to their pretty much interaction with the application in any way, or at least it's very hard to do so. But most companies keep pseudonymized data where the user is sort of separated from their actions. So there is a data set or multiple data sets tracking user actions, but they don't keep the specific identifier of this user, neither the name nor the email. They just have a randomly generated user ID, and based on that user ID, usually you see all the tracking, you see the timestamps of when they were active in the application or when they interacted with the product. However, if you join those two tables, the one with the user ID on the table that does contain sensitive user information, such as their location, their email, their name, their potentially address, then of course this is not anonymized data. Most companies solve that, first of all, by having those tables separated and then usually not giving access to the table with the specific sensitive user information to just anyone, requesting specific access for data scientists or other people when it's really needed for investigation of incidents or solving some specific user problems, for example, for customer support. But of course, even if you anonymize user data, you can still, with sufficient information, track a specific user if you're tracking a lot of their different interactions with the environment around them. For example, if you have even generalized location, if you check the data where they check in, for example, if they check in the bakery or write a review for this specific place, or as Google Maps, for example, you're constantly tracking their location, then you sort of know where they live and where they work. And if you are really interested in investigating that, you can identify a specific individual. So the ethical implications of this approach are pretty drastic, and it's important to consider what kind of data you're tracking and what kind of features you're introducing and how can the combination of two affect the user privacy. The next principle of ethics is non-discrimination. So the goal here is to try to not design the features that discriminate people based on nationality, gender, race, or other protected characteristics. That can be really tricky, and you might introduce biases with your features just based on how you're implementing those features, not necessarily thinking that they might introduce any kind of discrimination. One of the examples of those features is that a landlord on Airbnb can, for example, see the picture of the user that applies for renting this apartment. There were studies and tests that uncovered the fact that African Americans were discriminated against when it comes to allowing them or accepting them for renting those properties. So in that case, if you're working with potentially sensitive features, or if you have sensitive groups of people that are using your product, it's always a good idea to see how the different types of users based on various characteristics are impacted by this new feature. So not only look at the whole population and the difference between the test and control group, but potentially segment the test and control group to see how specific groups were affected by the new treatment. Another type of discrimination that's pretty common is actually the price discrimination. And this is not technically illegal, only certain types of price discrimination are illegal, but it can still be fairly unethical to experiment on different pricing levels for different kinds of users. Price discrimination is illegal if it's done based on race, gender, nationality, or religion. However, it's not illegal if it's done based on geography, for example, and that's really commonly used by companies that have subscription business model. This is called persistent dumping, and you've probably noticed that some of the streaming services, for example, that have subscriptions are priced very differently depending on which country you're logging in from. It can be, I don't know, $12 in US and $6 equivalent of dollars in a different country, and This is a legal type of price discrimination. The goal of it is to support the different countries from different income levels, but in some cases this can still be considered unethical if you're introducing price discrimination based on other different criteria.